Hey, it's Andrew Huang. I just released a ridiculous song. It's called Oblivion. Links in the description. There's a lot of interesting stuff I thought I could talk about, little techniques, how it's constructed. If you haven't heard it already, here is a part of it.
Someone or something to take me away. I've been waiting for someone or something to take me away. I've been waiting for someone or something to take me away. I've been waiting for someone or something to take me away.
And then it goes on like that, but I wanted to give you the gist. So there are four or five main sections to this song. Let's have a look. Firstly, I started composing this song just by exploring this really interesting chord that I like, and I have made 2 videos about this chord. I'll link them if you haven't seen them already, but it's a major chord with another major chord a ninth above it. So a really beautiful sound, and I just made this progression starting with that chord. So that's a layer of some contact piano and phase plant, though I've flattened them both now. And my influence here was very strongly that whole hyperpop PC music kind of scene. But then I got a comment where someone said it sounded like a Mario Kart level. And they're not wrong. Anyway, this intro is layered up with a whole bunch of different sound effects. So we've got a couple things I grabbed off of Splice. Got some of my own samples. That one's the tail end of the light beam sound from my Space-Time project.
Lost the pros till we hit the spot.
Also got some fun textures made on the modular synth. Am I actually pointing at it? Nailed it. The gigantic synth taking up a third of the frame. Oh, and on the final bit of the buildup, just some basic shaker. I've automated 2 thermals with an OTT in between them. Those are going on the chords, the piano and the synth. So getting a lot of characterful crunch and build, and then you could hear right at the end there, it goes back to more normal, just synth sound for the verse section. The song doesn't exactly have repeated sections. There are repeated musical components, but yeah, it's just kind of like A, B, C, D, E, just fully alphabetical structure. It's the purest way to do it. So the chords continue, and then the main thing about this verse section is just there's a lot of bass and drums, and both of them have been sped up, and the bass is kind of playing both as a bass line and as a melody. My last video is actually entirely about how I got that bass sound, so check that out if you're interested in that. I won't dive into it again for this video, but let's talk about the drums. So these are sped up, but kept at the same pitch thanks to time stretching. Here's the effects chain. I'm gonna turn all those off and you can hear the original. So one of the first things I did was turn the transients down to 50 here, so that just tightens them up. So Soothe 2 for a little bit of taming of some really high-end resonances. Parallel Aggressor on there to just smack it. Then I Heart New York 2 on there for a different kind of compression. I feel like Parallel Aggressor was really snappy, and this gives it a bit more heft. And then also more baby audio. I put tape on it. That gave it a bit more character, and then a smoother bit of compression as well. And then right on the end, as I often do, Ableton drum bus, and the transients turned way down here, although I've automated that for different parts of the song. So it's like 4 different stages of compression and saturation, and you know, it's just something I stumbled upon trying out different combinations of things, different orders, just honing in on the drum sound that I wanted, which was both tight and punchy and full-bodied. Did this weird little rim shot fill. It has disperser on it, which gives it that kind of poinkiness. Pew! Also, just because I felt like it, well, first of all, I haven't even mentioned this track is in 7/8, but this one bar with that weird fill is in 6/8 because it just felt better. And then weirdly enough, there was one bar way later in the song that felt better as normal 4/4 or 8/8 or like however you want to do it. So I stole away an 8th note at the beginning of the song, but then I put it back later. Partway through this section, I add in some shaker and cowbell. So everything else, the bass, drum, synth continue doing their thing, but you get this extra little lift, this little extra bit of groove. There is this weird fill where I chopped up a few different drum breaks. I just wanted something that was weird and stood out and kind of had that really resonant sort of snare feel. I don't know why, just heard that kind of flavor. Could be like a fun little moment, so I put it in. And then all our elements continue, but I add on a lead part from the Matrix Brute. And then we're on to the next section, and this is where things start to get even weirder. I heard this melody that I ended up doing as vocal Oz, and I knew I wanted a drop in energy because we had been very, fast paced, lots of drums, lots of percussion. So that all goes away, the bass guitar goes away, and I play a new, much chiller bass line on the Hydrasynth Explorer, and there are some modular synth textures on top of that again, kind of creeping back in. This modular stuff was such a perfect happy accident because it was a recording I did completely unrelated to this song. I was just messing around, and then when I wanted texture in this song, I dropped that file in, and this section lined up so perfectly where it's actually even in key. It's almost like climbing up a scale, even though I was completely unquantized on the modular. And it was the right kind of texture I wanted, and then it added these little melodic accents. All of those little twinkly notes just fit so perfectly on top of my chords, and it is one of my most favorite happy accidents that I've ever had in the studio. In vocal territory, I did this fun counterpoint melody where I'm also doing some formant shifting and panning, and it's pretty fun. That builds us up to this next section where when I was writing this, I had no idea what to do because I went from really high intensity to this much mellower thing, and then I was like, do I go right back up again, or like, do I find a middle ground? The main thing that actually made this section happen was deciding to arpeggiate the chords. It inspired this vocal melody, which I sang, but then I just did tons and tons of editing on. I applied different effects. I just cut stuff up and moved it around. It's all printed now, but here's what it sounds like.
I've been waiting for someone or something to take me away. I've been waiting for someone or something to take me away.
So there's delays, reverbs, just straight up cuts. I did some formant shifting on certain syllables. And then one of the final things I did was I took the already processed vocal track and ran it through Digitalis while I was changing presets on Digitalis, and I was resampling all of that. And so for certain parts, I just pop up to these printed Digitalis tracks. And I've just cut up my live drums, taking out most of the stuff that's not just the main kick and snare hits, although I leave some of the fills, so that's really fun when those come in, especially when you're a little bit unanchored from this being in 7/8. Oh yeah, on top of that, I also have sword sound effects because I was like trying stuff out, and that made the cut. Oh, sword pun. And then one more thing in this section is I played a whole bunch of stuff on my Nord Drum 3P. I'm really love-hate with this thing. It sounds so good, but the user interface is kind of bad. Anyway, just grabbed a bunch of different sounds like these. Just these little ear candy accents to add some more life to this section. Then for the final section, you can kind of think of this as a repeat of the thing that I called the verse earlier, because I actually just cut and pasted the bass back in here, made a couple little edits to some parts of it, but it's pretty much the same bass. But I fully removed the drums that I played, and then I just dropped tons of samples in, layered a bunch of breakbeats and resampled them. I added a few things. I think I searched for hyperpop drum samples in Splice. So we got a whole new feel for this section drum-wise. And this was just a lot of editing. I was trying to line up hits with the bass part, and my bass part, by the way, was almost entirely improvised. It was like just trying out little fills around the chord progression. Oh yeah, there's also a little woo sample. Compositionally, I did something that I just nerd out about, which is the feel of the 7/8 changes toward the end, just basically where the main snare accent lands. So in that part, the main kick and the main snare are perfectly equally spaced. So it's like 7 beats and then 7 beats. And then in this very final outro section where I kind of pull back a few of the elements and it's a bit more sparse, I decided it felt nice to switch the groove up so the snare gets pushed back a bit, and then we get this. So where it used to be 7 and 7, now the spacing is 8 and 6, or 4 and 3 if you want to think about it half timed. I think that about wraps up the main production and composition elements of Oblivion. It is out everywhere now. I hope you'll check it out if you haven't already. Stems and sample pack from this project are going to go to my patrons, so patreon.com/Andrew Huang if you're not signed up there. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.